We've all received a chain message, I'm sure. The ones that say something along the lines of, "Send this to 10 people or your worst day starts now." No one seems to question who they've come from. They circulate from phone to phone, computer to computer. I pride myself on my ability to ignore them. I've lived a lot of life, received plenty of these messages, and, of course, I've experienced none of the horrors they promised. Despite the tragedies of my life, none of them can be attributed to a chain message. The people who write them are simply sick, twisted individuals who thrive on fear. I was devastated to discover that my daughter, Catherine, was one of the culprits. I'm not sure what to do now that it's gotten so out of hand. A month or so ago, I received a phone call from Cindy Heller, our neighbor. She claimed that her daughter, Emily, had received a strange message that urged her to pass it along or there would be consequences. Emily had disclosed that the message came directly from my daughter and that she had never seen anything like it. I asked what the message said, and Cindy explained that she felt uncomfortable sharing the contents, but that it was unsettling and concerning. I apologized to her, told her that I would speak to Catherine about it, and hung up. Whether Catherine wrote it herself or simply passed it on from another source was far from the issue. She had frightened a neighbor. Cindy is a lovely woman, and I think of her fondly. I hold her to a standard of intelligence that would be too high to believe a chain message or the threats within. But I could never expect that of Emily. I told my daughter that messages like that were harmful. They could do irreparable damage to an already anxious soul, which I presumed Emily was. Catherine didn't respond. After a moment, I asked her if she had written the message herself. She shook her head. Guilty silence, I suppose. But, like I mentioned, this was a month ago. Even with a good scolding, she didn't stop. She sent her next message of terror to a group chat. Multiple neighbors, including the already paranoid Emily. I received a plethora of exasperated messages from exasperated parents and spent the evening consoling them. Not an easy feat. Cindy pried a tad bit more than the others, though she refused to share the contents of Catherine's messages, but threatened to call the police if the insanity, as she called it, continued. A far reach, but I hadn't seen the messages myself. Maybe they were that frightening. To explain my parental stances more clearly, I never bought my daughter a phone. I don't trust her to make good choices online, and 13 is simply too young to be exposed to the wide web. I did, however, give her my old computer from ages ago. The computer is terribly old, and our Wi-Fi is low tier, so the connection is too poor to make calls on its software. How Catherine managed to download some sort of message-sharing application is beyond me, but no one will disclose what software she is using. Cindy, above most other parents, has expressed concern for Catherine's social life. The world of technology is moving quickly, and Cindy feels that Catherine should be able to keep up. This is where our views on parenting differ, clearly. What the parents did share with me, however, was that Catherine's messages urged the recipients to continue the chain. Catherine was encouraging her friends to spread along her dark mystery sentiments. I was ashamed and confused, and promptly told Catherine to delete her messaging software and cease her reign of terror, or there would be consequences. She's a good girl, generally well-behaved, troubled in only minor aspects. I've chalked up the behavior to some sort of coping mechanism. Her mother, Evelyn, passed a few years ago, and I've done what I can to parent alone, but I see my shortcomings in Catherine as she grows up. Budding teenagers are hard to manage, especially those in perpetual mourning. The third message, from this morning, only came to my attention when a service agent arrived at my house. He informed me that a concerned parent, Cindy, no doubt had reported a series of concerning messages from a child in my home. I told him that I, too, was concerned about my daughter's new habit, but that chain messages were far from grounds to interrogate a person's family. Additionally, I asked him what the messages said. He wouldn't tell. All he said was that he wished to speak with my daughter. Protocol, he said. I was astounded and told him so. We had a sort of back and forth, and, by some grace of God or charm, I managed to calm his worries. I promised to speak to my daughter, and he relented. A reasonable person will always understand a reasonable perspective. An hour or so after the ordeal with the service agent, I decided to speak with my daughter. A last plea for reason, I told her that an officer had shown up, and that her antics had gone too far. She must have recognized the severity, because her eyes widened. Her face went white. I told her not to worry. The agent was long gone. That being said, I'd promised a consequence, and that was a promise I'd hold up. I unplugged her computer, hitched it under my arm, and left her silent and defeated in her room. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing. She was silent. I set up the computer at the kitchen table and began to scramble for a password. It was a 4-digit code with endless potential combinations. While I pondered the answer, I phoned Cindy. She was curt, clearly distressed by what my daughter had put Emily through. I asked her again to divulge the contents of Catherine's chain messages, what it was that had everyone so out of sorts, but she reiterated that she was not comfortable repeating them. All she said was that the messages were circulating, and more children were growing concerned. The talk of the neighborhood, she called it. In frustration, I hung up and resumed my mental search for Catherine's password. Then I tried Evelyn's birthday. The computer unlocked. Poor Catherine, so caught up over her mother that she made her birthday a permanent marker. I pored over the computer's contents, scrolling over a few standard digital games that I had downloaded to keep Catherine entertained. Then I spotted an icon with a speech bubble. I clicked it and watched the colorful loading wheel spin. The damn thing really was old. When the application opened, I saw a series of conversations, all sent this morning, and all starting with the same few words. Send this to as many people as you can, and so on. I scrolled down through the contacts before clicking the one labeled Emily. Now I am staring at the message, reading it over and over. A deep hole in my stomach. That's where I am at the moment. I feel as though time has stopped. I should have known. I'll insert the message below. Given that I won't have much time before the service agent is reported missing. From Catherine, to Emily, send this to as many people as you can, or bad things will happen to me. The man downstairs took my mother. There isn't much time. Share this or the man might get you, too. I see now why Catherine's messages had everyone so undone. One think a more severe consequence is in order. There is still time to teach her a lesson. But, perhaps, I'm wrong for being so hard on her. I'm a good father. The police, the neighborhood, they will understand. She's caused them too much pain, too much fear. The chain will end. I know I already mentioned this in the title, but I can't really overstate it. I was drunk when this happened. 3 sheets to the wind. 5 ways to Sunday. Whatever expression you want to use. Plastered, baked, hammered, shit-faced, stewed, stoned, smashed, sloshed and absolutely befuddled when it happened. More so than I normally am on a weekend, which is saying something. I drank 30 to Miller Lights that night along with half a full bottle of Jack and several swigs of strawberry Smirnoff. I also smoked a non-inconsequential amount of weed, so, yes, trying to say don't just take this story with a pinch of salt. Treat it like a frozen road. Anyway, I was out at my buddies out in the woods, and there were about 50 people still there when it happened. There had been a couple hundred there earlier, but it was getting to be around 2 a.m. and most had dipped off a bit ago. The fire was low and me and my buddies were all huddled around the remnants. All of us too lazy to go get more wood. All of us too cold to be anywhere else. It had rained on us during the party earlier, and though no one had cared when it happened even in July, it still gets cold when you're wet after dark. I remember there were little groups scattered around, huddled, and talking by the little burned barrels Hunter had set up as secondary bonfires for the party. We didn't know everyone who had showed up, but as most of the people we didn't know had brought groups of single chicks with them, so none of us minded. I remember sitting there all but completely out of it next to the fire, my damn t-shirt doing little to keep the shivers at bay. Some story was being told by someone about some teacher from back in high school who allegedly shit himself in class, and it was beginning to turn my stomach. Tore another Miller out of the box to water down my stomach and hopefully warm me a bit. That, dear reader, was a mistake. USC, regardless of how cold I felt at that moment, the beer was actually quite warm, having been out of the fridge for 8 hours and next to a fire for at least 2. I chugged it too fast to spit it out, and it came up foaming and gagging me in my throat as my friends laughed at me running toward the porta-john on Hunter's property at the far end of the field. I would have just gone for the wood line, but around Hunter's property, there's a bunch of rusty wiring that's hard to watch for even in the light, and in any case, I didn't want any of my friends recording my dumbass for Instagram. So I took off toward the lone stall and quickly, to my dismay, realized there was actually a line. Not a long one, mind you. Far as I can tell, there were only ever 2 people in that line, and as I was bearing down on the place, a chick walked out of the toilet letting the first person in. I didn't see her face in the dark, but I do remember her walking fast away from the John. In retrospect, I wish I could have been able to point her out to my buddies. Maybe ask her some things. At any rate, I was able to make it to the John and swallow back the vomit for a bit, only to realize the dude in front of me was wearing some kind of animal costume. It did seem strange to me that people do wear costumes to raves sometimes. I think it was a wolf, though I never really got a full look at it from the front. All I can say confidently about it was it stank like he hadn't washed the thing in 3 weeks. In fact, in some ways, it stank worse than that. It smelled a bit like a dead deer carcass, though I don't want to oversell it. If it had really smelled that god-awful, I imagine I would have said something else than what I managed to slur through as I full palm tapped him on the shoulder. "Hey man, any chance I could go first?" is what I got out, I'm pretty sure. He never turned. Instead, his back did this weird whip-like contortion, and then it arched up like a cat. He got on all fours, or rather put his 2 arms on either side of the stall, and then just scurried up the fucking thing. I don't know really where he put his feet or how the hell he did it, but he somehow got on top of the porta potty. From his vantage point up there above, he looked down at me with his weird revolve Halloween mask, and for a moment, it looked like a tongue came out between the jaws. If whoever was in the stall noticed any of this, they didn't seem to care, as not a sound came from inside, but between the booze and the scare, and the 1,000 superstitious thoughts going through my head as the thing breathed at me, threw up on the grass and passed out. When my friends came to find me with flashlights, I was laying in my vomit and couldn't be made to move my arm, let alone stand. They cursed me as they carried me back to the truck, mud and puke getting on them as well. They laid me in the bed rather than letting me sit inside the cab, and took me back to my place, where they took off my shirt and laid me down on my couch. I have no goddamn idea what that was, honestly none. No fucking idea at all. But I will say, it did make me think of this. -1 of 2007. It's Christmas Day. Excited to open presents with my mom and dad. A cold wind hits my face as I open a window to let the smell of bacon and sausages flood out. It's freezing. -4 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I see the snow pile on our porch. People yelling as snowball fights echo around our quiet neighborhood, and as the vision fogs from the snow squall that's incoming, it goes quiet. I sit on my chair listening to the melody of fire crackling as I wait for my mom to announce whose present belongs to who. That's when I hear a strange deep-sounding noise come from behind our house. I walk up and my mom asks where I was going. Confused, I ask if she heard that too? It's strange that only I heard that. I can't see much. Stupid snow squall gives perfect Christmas Day pictures, but doesn't let me see what is making a noise. I shuffle back to my chair as my mom announces my present. It's an iPhone. I was so excited I could almost scream. My excitement is cut short by that low-pitched sound again. The snow squall calms as I shuffle to the glass door leading to my backyard to check for the noise. No evidence of anything causing noise. This was my last straw. I would walk out there and see what was making that noise. I walk out to the cold, crispy fingertips of the air grabbing my face. I look out as the wild effortlessly blows my hair away. I squint and look around to check for anything. I see the snow. It's black. A large line is just black. What could cause snow to be black? Confusion as fear leave me at a loss for words. That's not my problem for now, I say as I walk back. I left the door unlocked. Biggest mistake of my life. I go upstairs to my room to set up my phone. Halfway there when I hear that noise again. It's coming from my kitchen. Mom, Dad, I yell out. No words. I walk down to the kitchen. The stairs creak following my footsteps. I turn to the kitchen. Nothing. I turn to the living room. My mom and dad are sitting in the chairs I last saw them in, pale with blood all over them. I scream in horror. The sound comes back. Thump thwump thwump. I look at the stairs. Nothing. I scurry out the house in a snow squall crying for someone. The snow squall gets worse as I yell for my neighbor to open the door. He saves me by opening the door and letting me in. I cry the story out while sniffling in between words. 20 minutes later, the police arrive. I open the door crying. A cold air hits my face. They question me. The noise. I heard the noise. Thwump, thwump, thwump. It echoes from the house. I walk in the house with the police. A cold air hits my face. Thwump, thwump, thwump. It drove me insane. I hate the noise, I hate the cold, I hate snow. I cried. A cold air hits my face. I look up. I see him. Thwump, thwump, thwump. Anger fills my eyes. I run up. Haze gone. A cold air hits my face. The air knocks me out. I think I woke up 30 minutes later. All I see is him. July 2024. All I see is him. It's dark at night. I open the back door and set up for a night to watch the stars. A cold air hits my face. I look around. I see him. Thwump thwump thwump. I can't go one day without seeing him. I fear the cold air because it reminds me of him.